reflecting the reality of what's going on between Iran and the United States, which was retweeted by Donald Trump, confirming what Arakchi said. And what we know right now in the case of the Strait of Hormuz, last night there were some sort of firing. CENTCOM reported that they shut down 2 or 3 Iranian drones, which were supposed, it seems that the strait is open as usual since day one, and they're trying to do their best. I think it's better to start with the Strait of Hormuz, because CENTCOM last night said the strait is open. The day before they said the same thing. What is the situation in the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, it's open for fish, I'm sure, but for ships, I'm not quite sure. And in fact, you know, how Trump a few days ago said that they had this secret project where they helped ships get out of the Strait of Hormuz. That was all nonsense. And they have not been able to sneak a single ship out of the strait during this period. And if they could, if they were really serious, if it was true, all they'd have to do is just give the names of the ships, because the ships in the strait in the Persian Gulf, they're all known entities. They have names, they have captains, they have crews, they have cargo. They departed from a particular port. They are going to another port. It's clear, which ship is where and where they're bound. And so if the Americans have facilitated 2 ships, 3 ships, 10 ships, or 100 ships, or 200 ships, they all have names. They could say, well, yes, so-and-so ship, which we've helped escape through the Strait of Hormuz, it is now on its way to such and such port in such and such country, and but they won't do that because they know it's fake. And last night, apparently, they again tried to encourage a ship at least one, to go through, and the Iranians again blocked it. And by the way, every time the Americans shoot down a cheap drone, they spend maybe 30, 40 times as much money as the Iranians through using those missiles. So nothing has changed. What I can say, though, is that the statements made by the foreign minister on television last night are pretty accurate. I mean, they're accurate. Someone told me that he meant that in his tweet he was referring to the Meh News material. He was speaking in general terms, and it wasn't necessarily to say that Meh News or anyone else was wrong. But if you look at the comments that he made on television himself, even though he said, as we were discussing before the show, he said he's not going to talk about the details, but he gave us some details. Those, as you could see, were pretty similar to what Meh News had put out. So in general, I would say that what happened was that 2-3 weeks ago, we were pretty close to a deal. And we've discussed this before, and we discussed what the Iranians would get and what the Americans wanted and that. So your viewers aren't as well versed as I, so I won't go into that. But then the Americans put in new demands. And the Iranians said, we're not touching this. And then the Americans started trying to put pressure on Iran. Netanyahu threatened to bomb Dahiyeh, then he bombed Dahiyeh. We know what happened then. And Iran hit Israel hard. The Israeli regime retaliated. And I heard from someone, I think I was on another show, and the host told me that I don't remember who, but the host told me that the Israelis hit Iran hard. They didn't hit Iran hard at all. But in any case, the fact that they refrained from bombing Dahi again, I think shows who had the upper hand in the exchange between Iran and Israel. But the Americans then also started attacking Iran at night on numerous occasions, which we all remember. And the Iranians would strike back very hard on each occasion. So then on, I think it was Wednesday, very terrible at these things. I always forget these things. But Wednesday, I'm pretty sure, the Qatari delegation came to Iran, and they informed the Iranians that those extra demands, they were withdrawn. So basically, we went back to where we were 2-3 weeks ago. In other words, the Americans tried to impose something new. The Iranians said no. The Americans applied pressure through the Zionist regime, through their assault on the Strait of Hormuz and on islands and on the Iranian mainland, and they got no results. So, but after the United States withdrew those demands, that was when Trump said he's going to hammer Iran and exit. He seemed drunk and he was talking all sorts of nonsense. And then that night was the last attack. And Iran hit back hard as well. And for the first time, they also hit Oman for the first time since the war, since the 39 days of war. This is still the same war. But anyway, so the Iranians hit back hard, but it appears to be pretty clear what happened. And that is that Trump withdrew those demands, but he didn't want to look weak. So he came in and said, I'm going to destroy Iran, so that after the attack, whatever deal potentially comes out, he'll say, I got it from a position of strength and they are weak. The Iranians were weak. And that, of course, didn't work. The Iranian response was very tough. But in any case, the content of the deal is pretty clear. It's exact. I mean, if anyone wants to follow the news in Iran, the Fars news agency, the Tasnim news agency, they cover this stuff pretty well. And these two news agencies, Tasnim and Fars, both have English, but I follow the Persian. I follow other news outlets too, but these two are, when it comes to these sort of issues, they're pretty clear. So now we are where we are. It's not clear if there will be a deal. But I would say for the first time that, in my opinion, the chances are better than 50%. Until now, I would never think that way, I think. Maybe there were times when I was more optimistic for a deal, but I think I'd never believed it would be the chances were this high. And but some things that Trump said, of course, are not true. One is that everything is finished. No, there are still issues to be resolved. And as far as I understand, I actually didn't see Dr. Arakchi's interview. You did, I think, but because I was on live television for Al Mayadeen, and I only had my cell phone in front of me, so as I was on television, I was constantly checking his interview, which it was almost 1 hour. That program was 1 hour, so the whole time I was on TV, I only saw the summary. But there will not be a signing ceremony. This will be done through electronic signatures. It'll be the two sides won't gather, and I think that's the right thing to do. I don't see there any necessity for Iranians to be standing in the same room with these people.
What he said last night is that in terms of the American attacks on Iran, he said the Trump administration tried to force zero enrichment on Iranians. Then Iran said, no, that's not going to happen. Then they attacked Iran. They wanted
That's right.
Iran. Yeah.
Someone told me that in a Telegram channel, an English language Telegram channel, that Dr. Arokchi was saying, like he was saying it in a way as if this was our fault. Again, I haven't watched it,
No.
but my friend, I called a friend who watched it, and also a family member who watched it, and they said no, that's not at all what he was implying, and that it's Iran's sovereign right, and to bomb a country because they're not unwilling to give up their sovereign right uh, uh, doesn't make doesn't there's nothing for the country to be blamed about. So no, that whichever Telegram channel said that, it's wrong. What he said is basically that the United States carried out an act of aggression because we were unwilling to forsake our sovereignty, which is, of course, the right thing to do. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the most fiercely independent country on this planet, with an extraordinarily resilient people. And I think by now everyone knows that. And like Hezbollah, people should learn more about the resistance and why they're so resilient and resistant. And why is it that, except for Hezbollah, and Ansarullah and Iran and so on, that we're just seeing we see nothing. We see no movement in our region.
Yeah, I think the most important points that he mentioned, one of them was Lebanon, and which we know Lebanon and the acts of resistance was since day one. They were the first point in the 10-point plan, 14-point plan, and right now is the same. And you mentioned how Iran, issued some sort of ultimatum to Israel not to attack Dahia, which worked after all. Just to mention what has happened between Iran and Lebanon, I think between Iran and Israel is so important because Israel attacked Dahia. Then Iran responded to Israel in the northern part of Israel. Then we had Israeli attack on Iran and Iranian retaliation from the north to the south of Israel. Then
that's right.
There was no retaliation after Iranian attack. 2 attacks on Israel, 1 attack on Iran on the part of Israelis. That was the reality. If we assume, I think the second attack of Iran, which we've seen some footages coming out of Israel, they hit some important targets in Israel. That's why they decided not to escalate it. Then you see the United States coming in, which from what we've seen, from what we've heard from the Iranian foreign minister last night, he said that it was because of, the Trump administration wanted to force this term of zero enrichment on Iran. I think that could be some sort of reality. I don't know that case of Apache helicopter has anything to do with the American attack on Iran. But what I'm somehow sure about, that the Iranian attack, the second Iranian attack on Israel was so hard that the United States decided to respond because Israel was not capable of responding to Iran.
What came out of this is that if there's any one-on-one war between Iran and the Israeli regime, it won't last 12 days like last time. The Israelis will be on their knees pretty quickly. And they know that, the Iranians know that. But also the Americans are not in a position to fight. We saw during these last few nights, every time Americans struck, Iran was very heavy-handed in its response. And the Americans are running out of time. They are truly running out of time. The crisis is about to hit. And we are very close. And people are, those who are optimistic, those who are pessimistic say it's going to be in June. Those who are optimistic say it's by the end of July. And even if there is an agreement, there will still be a crisis, and it will affect the world for a very, very long time. So Trump needs a deal, and Trump's military is not nearly as capable as he would like us to believe, and Iran has shown that. If Iran downed the helicopter, that again shows weakness on behalf of the United States. But what we do know is that the Iranians never took credit for downing the helicopter, and they always do when they strike American planes or drones or targets anywhere. So Perhaps it was a mechanical failure. Perhaps it was hit by a drone because there are the Iranian drones monitoring the Strait of Hormuz. It's Iranian territorial water after all. So that helicopter may have had an accident with the drone. We don't know. But at the end of the day, Trump did use it as an excuse to show his strength because of his retreat at the negotiating table. But that didn't work either. The Iranian response was very hard hitting. And from my understanding, important U.S. assets were destroyed.
The case of Lebanon, Professor Marandi, what can we learn? Because last night, Iranian foreign minister said, after all, Israel has to withdraw totally from Lebanon. This is the final goal. And I don't know how far can they reach to that conclusion during the talks or in the aftermath of the talk, because last night we had Israel attacking Nabatea in the southern part of Lebanon, and they're attacking, destroying, but the attack is not getting to Beirut so far from what we've seen.
They're bombing homes, they're bombing cities. They're getting, because on the battlefield they're not doing well. They're not doing well on the battlefield, and because of that, they're getting revenge on people. We've discussed this before. So when you say Nabatea, it's a city. I've been to Nabatea more than once. It's a beautiful city, large population in the context of a country like Lebanon. And what they're doing is just bombing the city and bringing about death and destruction out of anger and rage because of the fact that they're losing. Of course, even if they were winning, they'd do it too because they're just ruthless monsters. But it is because of their anger and rage. But the Iranians have said very clearly there will be no deal if the regime does not withdraw. It doesn't go back to where it was 3 months ago for this period. At the end of the day, it has to leave Lebanon completely, but it has to go before this war began. And that's, that there are like, I think, 5 points or where they occupied. They have to withdraw completely, and they will no longer be allowed to bomb Lebanon. And if they don't do that, there's no deal. If the Americans don't release the Iranian assets, there's no deal. If the Americans don't lift the siege, there's no deal. If the Americans don't lift the sanctions on Iranian energy exports, there's no deal. So what leverage does Iran have? It has its missiles, it has its drones, it has its military capability that we've seen used in the last couple of weeks. And it has, of course, the control over the Strait of Hormuz. And the Americans are in deep trouble.
Strait of Hormuz was mentioned last night. Iranian foreign minister said that the strait, we're not gonna, because the toll system is gonna be against the international law. So we have something else. We have a fee to be charged. I don't know, environmental fee or administrative fee.
Whatever. The fact that whatever, they're going to take money. That's the point.
Yeah.
You can call it a toll. You can call it a fee. Yeah, because I mean, since a toll is not in accordance with not acceptable in accordance with international law, they'll take a fee. That's how it works. But also they'll have control. In other words, Israeli ships won't be getting through. American naval ships won't be getting through. Iranians will prevent that sort of thing. So it will be controlled to make sure that the enemy doesn't militarize the Persian Gulf again, and to make it very costly for it to bring anything to those bases, because since they won't be able to use their ships, everything will have to be brought in by plane. And that makes the cost much, much greater and much more problematic. Sustaining it will be much more problematic to sustain it. So they will have control, and they will get their reparations through environmental fees or insurance fees or security fees or a combination of all these fees. Yeah, the world has changed.
Yeah. There are reports on CNN and in Financial Times about the Iranian underground cities And the United States and Israel, these new reports are showing they tried various times, more than 40 times, to attack one of the sites in Yazd, and they were not able to, somehow destroy the bases, that underground city. Then till the last moment before the announcement of the ceasefire, Iran was firing from that particular base to American bases and in the GCC countries and in Israel, the targets in Israel. So if you do you think today, with what's happening in Iran in terms of the military, in terms of the geopolitical analysis that is happening within the Iranian community, I'm sure that many people are talking about this. How does Iran find itself in the aftermath of, not in the aftermath of, in the aftermath of the second round of war, 40 days of war? I think as time goes by, the assessment going to be better and better because they perceived common information. They understand what are the capabilities of the United States, what has happened during the war. They're gathering information. What is that?
Well, a strong majority of Iranians believe that they won the war, and a small minority believe that they did not win. And a percentage is sort of like I don't know, or somewhere in the middle. But a strong majority believes they won the war, and it makes them much more confident about the future because they know that all the threats that the Americans have been making over the last 47 years, not just threats, all the hostility and the attempted coups and color revolutions and and terrorist acts and the maximum pressure sanctions and the murders through assassinations, all that has ultimately led to a war where the Americans thought that Iran would collapse. And during the 12-day war, it didn't happen. And during the 39-day war, it didn't happen either. And on both occasions, Iran won the war decisively. And Iran inflicted heavy damage on the Americans. Heavy damage. It wasn't just like a war where Iran was badly battered and the others, but it managed to survive and thus it wins. No, it inflicted huge damage on U.S. assets across. It destroyed all their bases. And then when Iranian infrastructure was targeted, they destroyed infrastructure from the Israeli regime into U.S. proxies in the Persian Gulf. Iran won the war and, of course, preserved the Strait of Hormuz, and its key military structures are very much intact. Those underground bases, which host factories, which host lots of Iran's air force, air defenses. In other words, Iran, before this war, moved around, not just military, but a lot of civilian infrastructure has been moved around to prevent major damage. So there are lots of places where things are being stored right now for after the war. Not, for example, even radio and television. They've emptied. I went to a studio to record a program in Iran, and they said they showed me that they'd removed all the computers and the machines that they were using. And whenever the war is over, they'll bring them back because they're very expensive and they're costly and so on. So they won the war. So Iranians feel confident. Of course, the economy is not doing well at all. Obviously, they destroyed factories, they destroyed schools, hospitals, they destroyed pharmaceutical factories, as you know. They targeted people's homes, apartment blocks. So of course there's damage, and because of the siege, of course, we have lots of inflation. But people are confident about the future, and they're resilient. So, and they know that the global economic crisis, more or less, that this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. So they're optimistic about the future, and they demand that this government keeps the Strait of Hormuz. And some people are not happy because they expect Iran to do more. And I meet them on the streets, and when I'm on the streets, and they say they are very. Some people are very are very concerned about any agreement. But I think that this agreement is a decent agreement. I think it's Iran wins in this agreement, and the important thing is that Iran continues to control the Strait of Hormuz. If the Zionists insist on slaughtering babies, which they love doing, then the Strait will be closed. If Trump says I can't do anything about it, then okay, fine. The Strait is closed though, and so on. So the controlling the Strait of Hormuz will continue. Will be an insurance policy to make sure that the United States abides by its commitments. If it doesn't, fine, they'll shut it down.
I think two things happened.
And in other words, Nima, in other words, we won't tolerate genocide. And the West, of course, supports genocide. The West supports the extermination of Lebanese and Palestinian children. We won't accept it. And Iran will make sure that the United States feels the pain if it doesn't accept it.
Yeah, two important outcomes.
If it doesn't accept Iran's terms.
Yeah. When it comes to I remember, Professor, you know that I was in Iran before this war started. And I saw what has happened with the protests, riots, and what was going on in Iran. And when I was leaving Iran, many people were concerned about the war. If the war happens, what would be the result of that war? I think that was a huge change. This war was a huge change for the Iranian people psychologically, because they thought that the United States is not anymore the United States it was before the war started. They know their capabilities. They're more confident. They know how capable they are to fight back. It's not going to be bringing those aircraft carriers, 2, 3 of them. That doesn't mean that you're going to be defeated. So the war psychologically has a huge impact on Iranian society and the way they see themselves. I'm not talking about the military part. I'm not talking about IRGC or army. I'm talking about ordinary people. I think that is a huge defeat for the United States, because the people are not afraid of the United States. What is your assessment of that?
Oh, absolutely. And although there were many people who believed we would win the war, and I believe we would win the war, although I am very pleasantly surprised that we did better than I thought, but I thought we'd win. I thought it would be more difficult. Not that it was easy. I thought it would be more difficult. But Iran's victory being so clear-cut and decisive, where the entire world can see clear for sure that Iran won, that is a big thing. And the siege, of course, failed too. They were supposed to starve us, and they're gloating about starving us. Remember, like senators would go on television and say they have no food, and they're hungry and like taking pleasure, and just like they take pleasure in killing Palestinians and Lebanese, and so on. But or starving Cubans, they're sick people, Epstein class people. But a lot of people thought that we'd win. But I think that you're absolutely correct, that at least half the population, I don't know, I'm just guessing, I don't have any statistics, but a lot of people were very concerned. And but I think but it was very interesting that even on day 1 and day 2, after Ayatollah Khamenei was martyred, he's the great man of our era. After in the entire world, he changed the world. He changed the course of history, like no one else has. And as the neocon godfather himself has admitted. But after he was martyred, the calmness in Tehran, and I was only in Tehran during the period. Of course, I sent my family to live in another part of the city away from me, but I didn't see it outside of Tehran. But in Tehran, there's always calm. A lot of people left, but the city was always calm. And if you went to a supermarket, there are no crowds. There's no shortage of bread or gasoline or anything like that. So even after it was announced that Ayatollah Khamenei was martyred, there was a certain calmness that I found stunning. And then I think we've gone over this, so I'm boring your viewers, but I think after maybe a week, I think people felt that we're winning, and then it just it just went on, and they were more and more confident that we're going to win this war. And I think gradually it was dawning upon people across the world that how are they doing this? And the resilience of the Iranian people, and of course the resilience of Hezbollah. I mean, I whenever I think about what Iran did, I also to look at Hezbollah, and people across the world should learn about Hezbollah, should learn about Iran, and what makes them like this. If they became like them, then the empire would run away from wherever they are, very swiftly. So so I think that by the end of the war, there were a lot of people who were saying, "Why did we accept the ceasefire?" A lot of people were saying, "Why did we accept the ceasefire? We should have continued." A lot of people, not like a few, not like a fringe. I personally think it was a good time. The Americans were forced to accept our 10-point plan. That was a very symbolic defeat, and Trump was attacked for it. And then later on, his spokeswoman said, "No, we threw it in the bin or whatever." But it was very humiliating for him. And they only made it worse for themselves. True, they took this opportunity to slaughter lots of women and children in Lebanon. I'm sure they take great pleasure in that. But the fact that the Israeli regime broke the ceasefire has kept the Strait of Hormuz closed for much longer than it was supposed to be, and that has really pushed the world towards the brink. So if this fool Netanyahu had if he had committed himself to the ceasefire back then, the world wouldn't be in the situation it is now. So he and Trump's weakness has brought this situation upon the United States, and this is a defeat much bigger, or at least when combined with the 39 days of fighting, this defeat gets bigger and bigger by the day. And that's the reason why Trump is accepting a ceasefire agreement that's to Iran's favor, not to his favor. And the nuclear issue and the sanctions will be dealt with later. I'm not saying we're even going to get to the second phase. No one trusts the United States. The United States is an untrustworthy regime. It always has been, but under Trump, it's just a madhouse. But in any case, the deal I think is good enough.
And the second point is how those red lines, which we had before all these rounds of wars, started. We had some sort of red lines between Iran and Israel. No one would attack the other, but those red lines are not there anymore. That's why Iran attacked Israel for the first time. Iran attacked Israel without being attacked by Israelis. So this is the new calculation in the region. I don't know what is the assessment on the part of Iranians, because it doesn't seem that Donald Trump would be able to change the new calculation that Iran put out, the new equation of the region, which is Israel has to understand that they cannot, because for decades, I would say for 2 decades, 3 decades, they're attacking other countries, destroying, killing people without having any sort of response from those people, because they're not capable. They don't have fighter jets, they don't have missiles, ballistic missiles, and Israel was so capable because of all those big, beautiful.
But most importantly, they don't have the will. They don't have the resistance and resilience. I mean, Hezbollah doesn't have many of these things, but they stand up to the regime. I mean, there's a difference between Hezbollah and what we see in Jordan. There's a difference between Hezbollah and what we see in its opponents in Lebanon. There's a difference between them and the Al Qaeda regime in Syria. They have an ideological framework and belief that gives them a resilience and strength that allows them to stand up in this way. But others, they don't have that. That's why I think people across the world should be looking to Hezbollah, to Iran, to the axis of resistance to learn from them and see what is it that makes them what they are.
Here is what the Prime Minister of Pakistan just tweeted. We are closer to a peace deal than ever before. With finalization likely expected in the next 24 hours, Pakistan is preparing for the electronic signing of the peace deal immediately after, followed by technical level talks next week. We would like to thank the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran for their ongoing commitment during the negotiations, and we extend our sincere appreciation to our brothers in the region for their support. We are confident that this historic peace deal will form a strong foundation for lasting peace. Are we that close?
It is not impossible, although when Trump spoke about a meeting on Sunday, that was definitely not going to happen. And of course, I tweeted that. And last night, the foreign minister said an electronic, the signatures will be made while the two sides are very far apart physically. So, but we'll see. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow. I don't know the exact timing, but I know that they have been working on it for the last. Again, ever since Trump backed down on, when was I said Wednesday, right? When the Qatari delegation came to Iran to inform the Iranians that Trump backed down from those new demands, then things began rolling because we were close. I mean, you and I went over this a few times. We were close already. And the reason why there's so much skepticism is because we were close and then Trump walked away. He said, no, I'm not going to give Iranian assets. No, I'm not going to lift the sanctions. No, all that nonsense. And one interesting point is that Dr. Araghchi said if Iran agrees to get rid of to resolve the enriched uranium at 60%, it will be done in Iran. What does that mean? That means that they'll have to use enrichment facilities to reverse the process to bring it down to 20% or 3.6%. So effectively, the Americans are going to have to deal with that. They'll have to deal with enrichment in Iran. And remember, some people may say, well, why would Iran get rid of enriched uranium at 60%? Iran only enriched in the first place to get leverage. And remember, we had the JCPOA. Obama cheated Iran. It was never executed properly. Then Trump tore up the deal. And then the Europeans, being the cowards that they are and the useless diplomats that they are, they obeyed Trump. First, they said, no, we'll find a solution, but they just obeyed Trump. So they imposed maximum pressure sanctions while Iran was committed to the deal. And Iran continued to remain committed to the deal for 2 years after they tore up the deal. And so after that, Iran restarted the nuclear program. And then after a while, Iran enriched uranium to 60% as leverage at the negotiating table. That is leverage. So if Iran, from the beginning, that was the Iranian calculation. So if Iran does bring that uranium back to 20% or 3%, it has to do it through enrichment in its enrichment facilities. And as far as I know, this is how it works. And that was the whole point from the very beginning, to get concessions through enrichment of uranium at 60%.
I think yesterday I talked with Ambassador Chas Freeman. He
And
said that
remember, sorry, Nima, sorry for interrupting. Remember, the next phase in the West, they keep talking about the nuclear program will be discussed then. Well, all the sanctions will be discussed then. If they want, it's not just sit down and say, okay, what are you going to do with that 6%? The Iranians are going to say, what are you going to do with all those sanctions? So it's not going to be pleasant for the United States at the negotiating table. And remember, the Strait of Hormuz is controlled by Iran.
Yeah. The frozen Iranian assets as well, it's going to be in the first round as they sign this memorandum of understanding.
Half of those assets.
So then later on in the last, because what is so confusing, Professor Marandi, is that after signing the memorandum of understanding, they're going to have something like 60 days of negotiations to reach the final deal. Is that the calculation on the part of Iranians and the United States?
Yeah, but no one knows what's going to happen, Nima. We don't even know if the deal is going to be signed. Nothing is for sure. This is Donald Trump. This is, the madhouse, the White House madhouse, So who knows? But then after it's signed, who knows if it's going to last a week, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Then some people come up. Last night I was on the streets, and people would come up to me and say, "Well, what if they're not going to abide by the deal?" And I said, "They don't. Then the Strait of Hormuz isn't going to be open." And the evidence is that when the Nazi regime, the Netanyahu regime, carpet bombed Lebanon, he just carpet bombed the country just to wreck the ceasefire, Iran said, "Fine, those ships are not going through the Strait of Hormuz." And that's where, look, it's been what, 2 months since then, almost. So thanks to Netanyahu. So if he does not obey, if Trump does not pull on harsh on Netanyahu's leash, then we're not going to have a deal, and those ships are not going through. And if they start going through, they'll be stopped. And if after a week of ships going through, they wreck the deal, they'll stop further ships from going through. Iran controls the strait. So the Americans, if they don't want their economy to crash, they should start thinking about, stopping Netanyahu from slaughtering all those kids.
There were some reports then that one of the GCC countries, with the Israeli attack on Iran, they banned their airspace for Israel. Is that country Saudi Arabia?
For Israel?
Yeah, because the latest Israeli attack on Iran, after Iranian attack on Israel and the northern part of Israel, Israel responded. Then one of these GCC countries was mentioned in the media that the country banned its airspace on Israel. Do you think that was Saudi Arabia? Because I don't see Iraq doesn't have the capabilities to ban the airspace, and so they can use the Iraqi airspace.
Yeah, Iraq unfortunately is not independent. The Americans control its central bank. It controls its funding. But you mean Israel or the United States? Because the Saudis and the others would never openly allow the Israelis to use their airspace. They would use the Americans would use their airspace.
Yeah.
The Americans would use their airspace to fuel Israeli jets at most, but the Israelis would not fly over these countries to attack Iran. I mean, they would allow the Americans to fly over and bomb Iran, but not the Israelis. So I don't see how that's an important report. I don't think the Saudis ever or the Kuwaitis ever allowed the Israelis to use their space to bomb Iran. But they would allow the Americans.
I think that's the key point for Iran, that because without the United States facilitating and participating and helping Israel, they're not going to be able to come with their fighter jets to attack Iran. If they get there, it means that they're using the refueling tankers in the air to refuel.
and the radar systems in Turkey and the AWACS jets in Turkey and whatever. But what I can say is that the Iranians have had some progress in their negotiations with countries in the Persian Gulf, and Iran is speaking to them on a one-to-one basis. And so the Saudis and the Qataris right now are in one place. The Emirates are in another. Kuwait and Bahrain are in yet another. I think right now the two countries that Iran is particularly unhappy with is Bahrain and Kuwait. But the Emirates has shifted somewhat, and the Saudis and the Qataris have shifted more than the others. But if the United States attacks Iran, and if Iran's critical infrastructure is attacked in future, Iran will retaliate against all of these countries and the Israeli regime. So, the improvements are a good thing. Hopefully they'll continue to move forward, but we're not at a point where they are going to remove U.S. assets from their territory and to behave like normal countries do. They're not there yet.
There was a meeting between al-Jolani, Syria, and the Prime Minister of Lebanon, in which, surprisingly, al-Jolani is suggesting to Lebanese Prime Minister not to urge him not to negotiate with Israelis because there is no point of negotiating. I think with the case of Turkey and Syria, I think it's Israel, as time goes by, is perceiving what's going on there. That is not going to benefit them, because you remember after the fall of Bashar Assad, they thought that it's going to be everything in their favor. But I think as we've seen in the latest meeting, that he's not, from his experience, by the way, he was negotiating and giving everything to Israel, and Israel was attacking Syria at the same time. I think this is the mere outcome of his experience in negotiating with Israelis and with Americans, with the Trump administrations. That's why he's suggesting that to Lebanon.
Few people have helped the Israeli regime more than the ruler of Qatar and the current president of Turkey. Few have done more to help Netanyahu than these two. And through the destruction of Syria, it's been much more difficult for the resistance. And Shara or Jolani, the Al-Qaeda or ISIS, former ISIS head of Syria, he blocked the border between Syria and Lebanon just to make sure that Iran would not be able to smuggle in aid to Hezbollah. That's been his job during this war. And yet he, being the proxy and fool that he is, instead of using this opportunity, these 3 months of war, where Hezbollah was fighting and drawing off the Israeli regime forces, and much of the forces were in the West Bank, crushing Palestinian population and strangling the people of Gaza, he could have deployed all those ISIS and Al-Qaeda madmen to fight against Israel and to create their own resistance and overwhelm the Israelis who are already having more than enough difficulty in Lebanon. The amount of territory taken in Syria and the importance of the territory taken in Syria is enormous. So, but he wouldn't do that. And if he did, Iran would help him. If he chose to resist against the Israeli regime, regardless of his sinister past, Iran would help him, no doubt. Turkey wouldn't under Erdogan, but Iran would, Hezbollah would, the resistance in Iraq would. But he does not have any will. Yes, we hear that the report that you're speaking about is, of course, it's an Al-Akhbar newspaper report. Al-Akhbar is close to the resistance. They have very good sources. It's a very good newspaper. I encourage, if people want news about Lebanon, there's more than one Al Akhbar. I mean the Lebanese Al Akhbar. It is a good source of information. But yes, he basically told the Lebanese prime minister that the Israelis destroy. They wrecked us at the negotiating table, and if you go down that route, that's what you'll get, and that's what they did get. So, once you join the American camp, you are subordinate to the empire, and
Professor Marandi, I think one of the objectives of the Qatari delegations in their recent visit of Iran, you mentioned how they were trying to bridge the gap between Iran and the United States, but the other important issue would be how are they willing to see Iran's new position in the Middle East, in the West Asia, because this is the new era, in my opinion. This is the new era. Yesterday, I talked with Ambassador Chas Freeman. He said this is literally the new era of the West Asia, because the United States, together with Israel, they were enjoying their impunity in their war, attacking and not having any sort of response from other countries in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, going to Lebanon, Gaza, Palestine. Those days are gone. This is the new equation in the Middle East. And how is that going to be perceived by GCC countries? I think is important as well. Iran knows what are the capabilities when it comes to the geopolitical issues, when it comes to the military aspects. But what is the perception on the part of Qatari government or the government in Saudi Arabia? And what are the communications between the two parties, Iranian party and GCC country party?
Well, Iran doesn't see them as a group. Iran does one-on-one negotiations. And there are big differences between them. And the GCC, the so-called GCC, is a joke, really. And we've seen that they have no capabilities. The smart country was Oman, and the other five were all fools. But they should be thankful to Iran. Everyone in the region and beyond should be thankful, because if it wasn't for Iran, the Greater Israel Project would be well on its way to achieving its desired results, at least in this stage. So, but Iran has no territorial ambitions against these countries, and that's all a part of their whole the propaganda model that they've been using against Iran. Iran is an expansionist kind of. Iran is a Shia. Creating a Shia empire. The Iranians the Iranians in the axis of resistance as Shia have sacrificed more for Sunnis than any Sunni. Some would say, oh, look at Syria, they killed hundreds of thousands of people. That's of course nonsense. It's like the numbers that they give about the protesters, peaceful protesters in Tehran being slaughtered. But no, in Syria, Iran stood up against the ISIS and Al Qaeda, which was the right thing to do. And it was against the policies of the empire, which was the right thing to do. Just like in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, Iran, who created the Taliban? Western intelligence agencies, Pakistan, Saudi money, Emirati money. And initially, they were murderous. They massacred people. But then gradually, Iran began to establish ties with segments of the Taliban, and a new generation came up that, although we have huge disagreements with them, they don't allow women to go to school, go to work. We reject that utterly, and they're intolerant towards other languages and other ethnic groups and other sects and so on, but not like before. So Iran helped the Taliban expel the United States. Without Iran, the Taliban would not have been able to expel the United States. When General Soleimani was murdered by the Americans, a huge Taliban delegation came to Tehran and went to his home. So, and just like in Iraq, it was Iran that was the force behind the expulsion of the United States. So if someone is going to say, well, Iran was sectarian in Syria, well, then why, in Syria, these Takfiri people who attack Iran all the time, they are complemented by Shias and Uzbeks and Tajiks, some Shias, Uzbek and Tajiks, who were affiliated to the previous government in Afghanistan, because they were saying that Iran helped the Taliban. So in Afghanistan, they're saying the exact opposite, that the Iranians support the Taliban and they're against the Persian language speakers, the Uzbek speakers, the Shias. The issue for Iran is the empire. The empire is the root of our problem in this part of the world. When the empire is gone, many things will improve. It's not going to become a utopia, but the empire uses sectarianism like Wahhabism and Salafism and all these other criminal gangster groups that come out of these, with this Takfiri ideology, just like they do in Europe, just like they do in Latin America and elsewhere, in Africa, Boko Haram and so on. These are all tools. So once the empire is gone, a lot of this extremism will die down, because they use the extremism to turn people against each other, one race against another, one nation against another, one sect or one religion against another. That's how the empire is able to remain in place, divide and rule. So in Afghanistan, Iran did not want to hurt the Shias. It did not want to hurt the Tajiks. It did not want to hurt the Uzbeks or the liberal Pashtun. No, but the priority was to get rid of the empire. The same as Syria. Look at Bosnia, Sunni country. Which country prevented it from being exterminated? Iran. No one else did anything. So and of course, all of these sacrifices are being made for the Palestinian people. They're not Iranians are not Arabs. They're overwhelmingly Sunni. And through decades of propaganda, even many Palestinians believe the propaganda about Iran and the disinformation and the lies that Qatar and the Saudis and the Emiratis and unfortunately the people in power in Turkey promoted about the Shias and Iran, and we believe in a different prophet, we believe in a different Quran, and we didn't believe in all sorts of ridiculous nonsense. They were constantly promoting this. Why? Because for two reasons. One was they were concerned about the spread of resistance, and second of all, they wanted to justify their own complicity with the empire. When people are saying, "Well, look at Hezbollah," they say, "No. They have to say that Hezbollah is evil. Hezbollah is corrupt. They're not like you." So that people, instead of saying, "Why aren't you behaving like Hezbollah? Why aren't you behaving like the resistance?" They'll say, "Oh, people would believe that the resistance is evil and corrupt and whatever," and that would lead to their continued inaction and indifference, and these despots would remain in power. And it has been effective. It has been effective for a very long time. But we saw during this war how Western media has lost its influence, and across the world, people were rooting for Iran and continue to do so. And in the Arab world, despite all this huge media apparatus, with hundreds, if not thousands of media outlets being funded by these regimes, people were cheering for the Iranians when they were striking U.S. targets and affiliated targets in the Israeli regime and also in the Persian Gulf. So the empire is indeed collapsing at multiple levels.
Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I thank your audience for tolerating me.
ਅੱਜ ਕਾਲਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਬੰਦ ਕੁੜੀਏ, ਅੱਜ ਕਾਲਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਬੰਦ ਕੁੜੀਏ, ਨਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਾਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਲੰਘ ਕੁੜੀਏ, ਨਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਬਾਜ਼ਾਰਾਂ ਲੰਘ ਕੁੜੀਏ। आजा मेरे कोल ठंडा पानी पियाल सा, जो तेरी मर्जी ओयो मंगाल सा, ना हो गर्मी विच तंग कुड़िए, ना हो गर्मी विच तंग कुड़िए। अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए, अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए। इस गर्मी विच किया तू सड़ती पानी पी पी किया तू मरदी। इस गर्मी विच किया तू सड़ती पानी पी पी किया तू मरदी। आ छां विच बैठा संग कुड़िए, आ छां विच बैठा संग कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। सुन नीले तले विच बैठ मेरे कोल वे, मैं भी कुछ बोला कुछ तू बोल वे। सुन नीले तले विच बैठ मेरे कोल वे, मैं भी कुछ बोला कुछ तू बोल वे। एवें खली है तू जिवें पीती भंग कुड़िए, एवें खली है तू जिवें पीती भंग कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए, अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। इस गर्मी विच किया तू सड़ती पानी पी पी किया है मरदी। इस गर्मी विच किया तू सड़ती पानी पी पी किया है मरदी। आ छां विच बैठा संग कुड़िए, आ छां विच बैठा संग कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए, अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। सुन नीले तले विच बैठ मेरे कोल वे, मैं भी कुछ बोला कुछ तू बोल वे। सुन नीले तले विच बैठ मेरे कोल वे, मैं भी कुछ बोला कुछ तू बोल वे। एवें खली है तू जिवें पीती भंग कुड़िए, एवें खली है तू जिवें पीती भंग कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए। अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए, अज कॉलेज हो गया बंद कुड़िए। ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए, ना बीच बाजारा लंग कुड़िए।
हेलो दोस्तों, आप सभी का स्वागत है हमारे इस न्यू ब्लॉग में। तो कैसे हैं? तो आशा आप लोग बहुत ही अच्छे होंगे, अच्छे रहिए, जहाँ रहिए स्वस्थ मस्त बढ़िया रहिए। हम लोग भी बहुत बढ़िया हैं। और आज ठंडी बहुत ही ज्यादा बढ़ गई है, भैया को तो ठंडी लग रही है।
बड़ी ठंडी कुदार उठाओ काम करा, ठंडी लागे बहुत।
इधर कुदार है और आई कहा है,
ये कुदार है,
इधर ही कुदार है। हम लोग कहा जाते
पहली बार ऐसा कुदार हम लोग देखे हैं दोस्तों।
हम खेती
कुदार
करते नहीं है,
समझ में नहीं आ रहा है। हमारे यहाँ ऐसे ही होती है कुदार, बड़ी बड़ी होती है। और दोस्तों सलोनी का वीडियो बनाने का मन नहीं करता है, और आप सब सलोनी को सपोर्ट करिए। बहुत वीडियो बना रही है, इस समय डांट पड़ रहा है तब, ठीक। और खूब सपोर्ट करिए। और अभी ठंडी पड़ रही है, इसकी वजह से हमारे घर सब्सक्राइबर नहीं आ रहे हैं। तो ठंडी पार हो जाएगी, फोन बहुत आ रहा, कमेंट भी बहुत आ रहा, सब्सक्राइबर
ठंडी की वजह से हम लोग नहीं मिला पा रहे हैं।
इसकी वजह से मान लीजिए अभी हमारे लिए नहीं दिक्कत है, जो आएगा हमारे घर उनके लिए दिक्कत है।
दूर से कहीं से,
हाँ, मान लीजिए
ठंडी है, पता नहीं कैसे आएंगे कैसे नहीं। तो अभी खेत में हो रहा है काम, क्या क्या बोया गया है आप लोग को दिखाते हैं।
दिखा दे सब।
ये है गोभी, इधर गोभी लगा है, और इसमें रखा डाला गया है पालक, और इसमें है सोआ। और हमारे जीजा इधर हैं, ये बो रहे थे लेकिन थक गए हैं। थक गए इतना जल्दी हैं?
पोस्टर बना बजा थे पोस्टर।
तो बहुत ज़्यादा मेहनत कर रहे हैं सुबह से ही उठ के। और इसमें है धनिया, धनिया नहीं, सुबह मिस्टेक हो जा रहा है। गोभी है छोटा छोटा, देखिए इधर, और उसमें पालक है और लहसुन जो हरी उनहरी सब लोग बोया जाएगा। तो बोया जाएगा, फिर देखा जाता है कैसा उगता है कैसा नहीं, मेहनत सफल होता है कि नहीं। मेहनत तो कर रहे हैं लोग, रात को आया है बीज तो लगाया गया है अंधेरे में। तो चलिए खेती करते हैं। हम तो नहीं उठाएंगे, जीजा और भैया दोनों लोग कर रहे थे, हम लोग खोद रहे थे, पता नहीं क्या हम तो किए नहीं तो करते कभी, मतलब ऐसा काम नहीं किए। खेत का काम हुआ चाहे और भी कुछ, तो घर का काम करेंगे, लेकिन खेत का काम नहीं आता मुझे कुछ भी। तो चलिए अब ब्लॉग को यहाँ तक देखें तो थैंक्स, और मिल जाएंगे नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। तब तक के लिए बाय बाय। और हमारा खेत कैसा लगा बताइएगा जरूर।